No, my cat, no, you're the most fearsome feline. No one chases mice like you. I don't care if he's a king. You're the only cat for me, honestly. I think you regal. Oh, don't be like that. It's just a deck tech. When they do another Miri card, I'll do one on you. Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG. Welcome to another Commander video. We're keeping it Marvel this week. Today we're looking at Black Panther, Wakandan King. It is a green and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature human noble hero. It has First Strike and Survey the Realm, which is whenever Black Panther or another creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target land you control. It also has Mind Vibranium, which is pay 3 generic to move all +1/+1 counters from target land you control onto target creature. If one or more +1/+1 counters are moved this way, you gain that much life and draw a card. So Black Panther is another really cool commander from the Marvel set. It rewards us for putting creatures into play by letting us put a +1/+1 counter onto a land we control. What's cool about that is that it triggers off of any creature that we put into play, importantly including tokens, which is actually very strong. Another cool thing about that ability is we can put those counters onto lands that can then become creatures. This means we can make our lands huge and then beat people in the face with them, which is a very unique ability and makes Black Panther a very cool commander. But if we want to, we can then mine those lands later in the game to move those counters from a land onto another creature. When we do, we gain some life, and importantly, draw a card. That is honestly a great amount of value. Commanders that draw us cards are generally great, and so are cards that move counters around, because they basically let us trigger effects that care about when we put counters onto things. This ability can also be activated at instant speed, which basically means we can make it into a combat trick. You can swing through with a whole board of creatures, wait to see what your opponents block or don't block, and then activate it. That could mean we eat their best blocker, or we could put the counters onto an unblocked creature to push some damage through. What that all means is that this is going to be a token deck with a +1/+1 counter sub-theme. For our game plan, as Black Panther is only a 2-drop, we're going to get him out and into play as early as possible. We're then going to be continuing to ramp and then get as many creatures into play. That could be from casting them, or it could be from casting bigger and bigger token makers. While we're doing this, we'll be putting a bunch of counters onto our lands. We can move some counters around with Black Panther to help us win some combats, or to keep us drawing through our deck. When we feel we have a commanding board state, we can use some cool synergistic cards to buff up our team and turn them sideways. We could animate our lands and use them to beat down our opponents as well, or we also have a cheeky little combo that we can use to win the game, or we could just put all the counters onto Black Panther and swing through for a 21 point of commander damage win. It's honestly a very flexible deck, and that's one of the things I like best about it. Before we move on, a quick note on how this video will work. We don't give full deck lists in this series, rather we break down the deck into all the different sections that the deck needs to function. We'll then tell you how many cards to run in each section and give you a bunch of options and suggestions for you to pick from. This way you can make the deck work for you, your playstyle, and your budget. Talking of budget, if you're thinking of picking up cards for this deck, please consider using our TCG Player affiliate link down in the description below. Using it helps the channel grow, and we greatly appreciate it and love you all. The first place we're actually going to start today is with our land section. Because our lands are an important part of the deck, it's important to go over them first so you can see what we're dealing with. First up we have Dryad Arbor, a unique land that is also a creature. In this deck, that is great, because it means that we can load it up with counters from Black Panther and then just attack and block with it straight away. It is a creature all of the time. And yes, it does die to a Doomblade, but it also ramps us and kills our opponents, so it's pretty much going to be an auto-include in this deck. We then have more creature lands next, but the rest we have to pay some mana to activate them. This is both good and bad, as paying mana for things is always a downside. However, them not dying to most sorcery-based removal, including most board wipes, is going to be pretty helpful. You first have cards like Cave of the Frost Dragon, Lair of the Hydra, Restless Prairie, Stirring Wildwood, and Treetop Village. These are fantastic as they can all be animated into creatures, which will get buffed if they have those +1/+1 counters on them. These are fantastic in the deck, because although some of them might come into play tapped, they still generate us colours of mana, which is great in the deck at helping us cast our spells, and is exactly what we need until we're at a point where we can turn them sideways. We have some colourless options next, with cards like Blinkmoth Nexus, Crawling Barrens, the meanest of the lot with Inkmoth Nexus, but then there's Mishra's Factory, Mutavault, and Soulstone Sanctuary. A lot of these don't come into play tapped, which is nice, but they don't produce colours of mana, so don't help as much when it comes to casting our spells. But because we can still animate them when they have a bunch of counters on them, and turn them sideways, they are still really cool and I'd want to include them. If I'm honest, especially Inkmoth Nexus. If you get 9 counters on this and then it connects, you will take out an opponent with infect damage. We then have some lands that are indestructible, with things like Cascading Cataracts, Darksteel Citadel, and Thornglint Bridge. Why these are great is that these are lands that our opponents can't destroy. So if you want to put our counters into a safe place, we can use these lands to store those counters until we are ready. We then have some cards that muck around with counters next. Firstly, Llanowar Reborn lets us move a counter from it onto a creature that enters play. That could be from the one it starts with, or it could be one that we put onto it later. Graph doesn't care where the counter came from, just that it has one. Then you have a card like Gavony Township, which is a great reward for being in Selesnya, as we can use it to put a counter on each creature that we control to make our board state all the more deadly. We then have lands that can make us more token creatures, with cards like Castle Ardenvale and the incredibly broken Field of the Dead. These just put more bodies into play, meaning more counters go onto our lands, ready to swing or ready to be mined. They're just great includes in the deck and are basically free to run because they're on lands. Then lastly, for the utility side of things, we have a card like Rogue's Passage. Why I like this is because having a nice backup plan on a land is very good. We could get to a point where we get to 19 counters on our commander, making it a 21-point commander damage lethal threat. Having this there to make it unblockable and be able to take out an opponent in one hit with it is honestly very scary. Next up we have our dual lands. As we already have some utility lands that come into play tapped, we want all the dual lands in this deck to come into play untapped. We want to be playing our commander on turn 2, we can't be waiting for our lands. There are plenty of options now that aren't too expensive, run the best ones that you can. We're then going to top up this section with somewhere between 10 to 20 basic lands, and your mana base should be good to go. So, we have our lands, the next thing we need is to get some creatures into play, and one of the best ways to do that is with token makers. They are single cards that make us multiple bodies, perfect for games of Commander. First up we have a card like Awaken the Woods, a great spell that we can pump all of our mana into and make us a bunch of tokens. Why this one is especially great, however, is it makes us a bunch of Forest Dryad tokens which can ramp us, and then we can also put the counters on them, ready for them to rumble in for damage. We then have the more traditional X spells next, with cards like Secure the Waste, Finale of Glory, March of the Multitudes, and the Ysgard's Call Adventure part of Horn of Valhalla. These are just really solid at putting a bunch of creatures into play, and for each creature that these make, we trigger our commander, and we'll put that many counters onto any of our lands. It all synergizes, it's all great fuel for the deck. We then have token makers that trigger when we play lands. We are running slightly more than a regular deck here, so we'll be pretty set to hit our land drop every turn. So cards like Springheart Nantuko, Scoot Swarm, Felidar Retreat and Maya Bretgard Protector, all making us extra token every turn, or possibly 2 in a turn if we have things like fetch lands or rampant growth effects, is just going to be really, really good. We then have a card like Jacked Rabbit. This card is awesome in the deck. It's a creature that makes us tokens equal to its power when it attacks. Hopefully you can see how really good this is, as we can make its power huge by moving the counters onto it with Black Panther. Then it'll attack, make a whole load more tokens, and put more counters onto those lands. You can then do it again the following turn, basically doubling its size again and again, making more and more tokens. We then have some other creatures that also make us a bunch of tokens. Torrent's Fist of the Angels is a great card that makes us a token every time we cast a creature spell. The fact those creatures have training, so will also grow every combat, is going to be really nice. Then a card like Avenger of Zendikar just puts so many tokens into the board in one fell swoop, it's honestly going to be fantastic. We then finally have a Planeswalker like Elspeth Sun's Champion. This can make us so many tokens in a turn, it's nuts. But then the fact that -3 can be a one-sided board wipe is also bonkers. And then the -7 can make all of our tokens a lethal threat, means that Elspeth is definitely a card you should consider including. The next part of the deck is going to be some +1/+1 counter synergy. It's a large part of what the commander is doing, so let's take advantage of it. First up, we have cards like Primal Vigor and Doubling Season. These both not only double the amount of tokens that we create, but they double up the amount of counters we put onto something whenever we put counters on a thing. If you've ever played with them, you'll know how broken they can be in Commander. And an important thing to remember is that these double the counters every time we put them on something. So they'll double the counters we put onto our lands, and then when we move them, that is a separate occasion of counters being put onto something, so they will double them again. These are the cards you play when you really want to go big. You then have an effect like Tribute of the World Tree. This will basically make all of our tokens come in with an extra counter on them, or if we then play something bigger, will draw us a card. Both of those options are great, making the Tribute an easy include for me. We then have cards like Metastatic Evangel, Evolution Sage, and Khan's Bastion. These all add some proliferation to the deck in some way. Proliferate is broken in a +1 counters deck because it lets us tick them up and any other counters that we might have, like a Planeswalker Loyalty for example, up all the higher all in one go. You then have maybe the most adorable card of the year in Generous Pup. This has the great line of text that whenever we put one or more counters onto the pup, we put a counter onto all of our creatures that we control. Just using this to grow our token board by a counter every turn is exactly what we're after, and these also get doubled up by things like Primal Vigor or can be proliferated by the cards we've just mentioned. One reason we want to put a counter on every creature we control is because of a card like Abzan Falconer. This gives every creature that we have with a counter on it flying, and making your whole team unblockable is a fantastic way of winning any game of Magic. Then for some final bits of counter synergy, we have a card like the Ozolith. This makes it so that if a creature we control dies, its counters are moved onto the Ozolith, ready for us to move them again onto something else at the beginning of combat on our next turn. This is great at keeping all that good work that we've done, and ready for making our commander that lethally big threat. Next up is our card draw section, and like with most decks, we're looking for somewhere between 8 to 12 bits here to make sure the deck functions. First up, we have some cards that work great with tokens. A card like Idol of Oblivion draws us a card on a turn where we've made one, which should be really easy to do in this deck. And then Skullclamp turns a 1 toughness creature into 2 cards. Still busted all these years later, and to me, both of these are auto-includes in any deck making as many tokens as this one is. We then have effects like Mentor of the Meek, Toskia's Welcome, and Welcoming Vampire that draw us cards whenever a small creature, like a token or a mana dork for example, come into play. These are great at just keeping our hand nice and stocked over the course of a game. We then have a card like Rite of Harmony. This is solid if you just cast a couple of small creatures after, but it's absolutely nuts if you play a large token maker afterwards. As importantly, you'll draw a card for each creature that comes in. Yes, it does need some setup, but the upside of this is so high it's got to be worth considering. We are playing Commander after all, let's do something broken. When we do have a board state, we have cards like Shamanic Revelation and Camaraderie. More solid options of drawing us a bunch of cards in one go. We then have a card like Kutzil, Malamat Exemplar, which basically says whenever a creature with a counter on it deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. Or you have a card like Toski, Bearer of Secrets, which draws us a card whenever any of our creatures connect. We're going to change things up next with a card like Exemplar of Light, which draws us a card once a turn whenever a counter is put onto it. That could be from our commander, or it could be from one of our many other effects. We then have a card like Return of the Wildspeaker, that draws us cards equal to the greatest power amongst creatures we control, perfect for if we've gone tall with our counters. The fact it's also an anthem for our tokens is going to be great as well, as a backup way of winning the game. And then finally, we have some more generic bits of card draw in these colours. These are great if you have them, or if you need some bits to top up this section. The next thing to go over is our ramp section. This is going to be fairly hefty, because if we're attacking with our lands, it means we can't tap them for mana that turn, so we will need some other bits to help make up for that. The deck basically wants 2 types of ramp. The first is on mana dorks. These are cheap creatures that generate us mana, but also importantly will trigger the counters made by our commander when they come into play. There's a bunch of 1 mana options for you to consider, with things like Avacyn's Pilgrim, Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, and Elvish Mystic just being some good examples. At 2 mana, we have a card like Llanowar Loam Speaker, which can turn a land with a bunch of counters onto it into a creature that we can attack with, or a card like Jaya Sage, which is a great creature we can dump a load of counters onto, and it'll tap for mana equal to its power. At 3 mana, we have cards like Enduring Vitality, which turns all of our token creatures into mana dorks, and then you have Kami of Whispered Hopes, which is a mana dork that also buffs up the amount of counters that we're putting onto all of our permanents. Again, that's whenever we put or move a counter onto something. The second thing the deck needs from its ramp is lands. We want more lands in play in this deck. We've got a bunch of landfall effects that we mentioned earlier that will love these. So using rampant growth effects like Nature's Law, 3 Visits, Farseek and Cultivate will be great at giving us the mana that we need to use. Where possible, I would go for ones that get non-basic lands out of the deck, as they will let you get any dual lands you might be running as well as basics. It's also worth mentioning here that if you're running Dryad Arbor, then you should probably be running Green Sun Zenith as well. Normally a green creature tutor, this can go and get Dryad Arbor for just a single green mana on turn 1. Well, that's pretty solid, and can also tutor up a Wincon later in the game as well. And while I personally don't think these synergize with the deck, I get yelled at in the comments if I don't at least mention, yes, Sol Ring and Arcane Signet are good Magic cards that probably should still be included. Next up is our interaction section. Personally, I like to run at least 10 bits nowadays, so we're always able to answer whatever our opponents are up to. First up, we are in white. We have the best bits of removal and commander available to us, with Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. Run them, they are just great. After those, we have a bunch of effects in these colours that can answer a multitude of threats while leaving something much smaller behind. Cards like Fateful Absence, Get Lost, Beast Within, Generous Gift, and Stroke of Midnight are all great options that you can look at running. For an on-theme bit of interaction, we have a card like Aura Mutation, which can answer a pesky enchantment, but then also gives us a bunch of tokens that'll trigger our commander. For board wipes, there's a couple of ways you can go with this. Firstly, we have effects that will hopefully leave some of our board behind. Damning Verdict destroys all creatures without counters on them, which will hopefully be a decent amount of our board. Or you can run Austere Command, which lets us destroy creatures with the right power that we need. Perfect for keeping our token board state around before moving a bunch of counters on them, making them bigger. Or you can look at running board wipes that make us some tokens. Martial Crew is a great example, as if X is 5 or more, we'll still get the counters onto a land before Black Panther gets wiped. Or you have a card like Azuri's Predation, which is an awesome mass fight spell that puts a bunch of beefy 4/4s into play. Next up is a little bit of protection. Our commander will be in play nice and early, so it means it will have plenty of time to paint a target onto its back. This section is to help keep it around for as long as possible. First up we have a card like Inspiring Call, a great instant that protects all of our creatures with counters on them, and then also lets us draw some cards. It's just very nice, it's very synergistic, very solid. We then have a card like Grand Crescendo, a fantastic token maker that if we need to for just double white, can protect our whole board for a turn. The overlap there is just so phenomenal, it could be one of the best cards in the deck. We have some other ways of protecting our board with cards like Heroic Intervention, Teferi's Protection, and Flare of Fortitude. These are very good in decks that are trying to build up a big board state and are great at helping us dodge the inevitable board wipe. And then obviously we have a card like Swiftfoot Boots. The Hexproof is great at protecting a key creature from targeted removal, while still letting us target it and put counters onto it. We're going to touch on a bit of recursion next, as things die a lot in Commander, and having ways of getting access to them again is always going to be solid. First up we have a card like Evolution Witness, which lets us bring back a permanent anytime we put a counter onto it. We could easily be getting advantage from this multiple times in the game, we should consider including it. You then have Balaged Recovery, which is basically free to run because it can be played as a land when we need it to be. And then because there is a chance our lands could be dying when we animate them, I'd be tempted to run a couple of Crucible of World effects. These are effects that let us play lands again from our graveyard. These do get better if you're running fetch lands, so if you're going for the more optimized version of this deck, then this is something I would consider. Okay, so that's the bulk of the deck. Let's go over some dedicated ways the King of Wakanda can win the game. First up, we have Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. This is a very powerful creature that turns all of our non-token creatures into lands, meaning that with our commander out, we can put counters onto them straight away as soon as another creature comes into play. On top of that, we have some combo potential with this card as well. If we have Ashaya, Black Panther, and a card like Basking Brutescale in play, we are about to pop off. How it works is we need Black Panther and Ashaya in play, and we need to cast the Brutescale. When the Brutescale enters, Black Panther triggers, and because the Brutescale is a land thanks to Ashaya, we get to put the counter Black Panther makes straight onto it. When we put that counter onto the Brutescale, it triggers and makes us a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn token. That spawn triggers Black Panther, letting us put another counter on the Brutescale, making another spawn. This basically loops infinitely until you put a counter onto something else. What you end up with is unlimited 0/1s that sack themselves for mana, so that means unlimited colorless mana, and an infinitely large Brutescale. How you win with that is kind of up to you, but as we'll be able to infinitely move the counters around with Black Panther's ability, we'll be able to effectively draw our whole deck and gain a bunch of life. The most efficient way to win for spikier players is probably just cast the largest walking ballista ever and ping out the whole table. For the less combo-minded player, there are some other cool ways that we can win. Firstly, a card like Sylvan Awakening is awesome. As it animates all of our lands, they'll get buffed by all the counters that we have on them, and then we can turn them sideways to win the game. You then have a card like Nissa who Shakes the World. This makes all of our forests tap for extra mana, but then can also permanently animate a land and put 3 counters on it. The ultimate then puts all forests from our deck straight into play and makes our lands indestructible. This means we can always beat down and block with them. It does also go infinite with Springheart Nantuko that we also want to be running anyway, and that's pretty awesome. We then have a pet card of mine next with Champion of Lambult. If we load this up with counters, it very quickly makes our whole board unblockable, which is a surefire way to win a game of Magic. And then we have a card that I think is great in this deck with Archangel of Thune. Black Panther's ability does gain us life as well, which means when we move the counters over, we'll gain that much life, and with the Archangel in play, we'll put that many counters onto each creature that we control. Perfect for buffing up our army of tokens. Alright, that's going to do it for the video. Thank you all very much for watching. If you found this helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel. Greatly helps us out, greatly helps us do cool and interesting things. If there's any other commanders from the Marvel set you would like me to take a look at, let me know down in the comments, and just maybe I'll check them out. But until then, I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.